Some echoes never fade, and some whispers reach across time to those who will listen. Good evening, dear listeners. I'm Evelyn Blackwood, and tonight, on Midnight Murmurs Radio, we'll journey together into a quiet autumn evening, where memories linger and the wind carries secrets of those who came before. Clara adjusted her coat against the chill that crept across the small porch of her aunt's old cabin. The trees surrounding the clearing were dressed in brilliant shades of amber, gold, and crimson, leaves tumbling softly to the forest floor with each gentle breeze. Even in the stillness, the rustling of leaves carried a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat of the woods. The cabin had been in her family for generations, but tonight it felt unfamiliar, as if the house itself held its breath, waiting for something to unfold. She stepped carefully along the worn path, each footfall releasing the faint scent of damp earth and decaying foliage. In the distance, the lake shimmered in the fading light, mist rising off its surface like ethereal wisps. Clara paused, letting her gaze drift across the water. Her mind wandered back to the letters she had found hidden in the attic, written in her mother's delicate handwriting. They spoke of a friendship long past, secrets tucked away beneath layers of time, and a presence that had never quite left. The cabin's windows glowed faintly in the dusk, throwing rectangles of warm light onto the surrounding leaves. Clara remembered the stories her mother had whispered to her as a child, stories of ancestors who had walked these woods and of the lake that could hold voices, even those that had long since faded. A shiver passed over her, though it was not entirely from the cold. There was the sense that tonight the past would speak clearly, unfiltered by memory or imagination. Clara reached the edge of the lake, her reflection rippling in the still water. She knelt and let her fingers brush the surface, disturbed by the slight chill. The water seemed deeper, darker than she remembered from her childhood visits. And then, almost imperceptibly, a movement, a faint ripple, not from her hand, but from somewhere else. She straightened, listening. There was a whisper carried on the wind, the sound delicate yet urgent. Clara, her heart skipped a beat. The voice was familiar, though she could not place it immediately. She scanned the tree line, the mist curling and shifting, and for a moment felt as if the lake itself was watching. She thought of the letters again, of the warnings and the confessions that had been left for her to discover, and somewhere deep in her chest, a mix of dread and anticipation fluttered like the wings of a bird, trapped in a cage. The fading sunlight painted the forest in gold and shadow, and Clara felt the weight of silence pressing in from every side. She inhaled slowly, filling her lungs with the scent of pine and fallen leaves, and exhaled, trying to steady her racing thoughts. Memories came unbidden. Childhood afternoons spent running along these paths. Evenings curled up with her mother beside the fire, listening to stories that seemed fantastical then, but now hinted at truths she was only beginning to understand. The wind carried another murmur, this one softer, almost tender. Clara closed her eyes briefly, imagining the voice belonged to someone she had known, someone who had waited, perhaps for decades, for the right moment to be heard. A part of her wanted to run back to the cabin, to feel the safety of walls and warmth. Yet another part urged her forward, to uncover what had been hidden in the shadows of her family's past. She knelt once more by the water, taking a small coin from her pocket. "For the lake," she whispered. It was an impulsive act, a gesture learned from some forgotten story in her mother's letters. She dropped the coin into the water, listening as it sank with a faint metallic plink, ripples spreading outward, touching everything in the dimming light. The lake seemed to respond, its surface shimmering, almost as if acknowledging her presence, or perhaps the presence of something beyond. For a long while, Clara simply sat there, her thoughts drifting between past and present, reality and memory, until the chill of the evening forced her to rise. She turned slowly toward the cabin, the forest around her alive with the soft rustle of leaves, the occasional caw of a distant crow, and the whisper of wind weaving through branches. She could feel, deep within, that this night would mark the beginning of something important, a journey of discovery, of reconciliation, and perhaps of understanding. As Clara climbed the steps to the cabin, the warm light spilling onto the porch welcomed her like an embrace. She paused for a moment, listening to the night, letting the stillness sink in, letting the echoes of the lake and the forest mingle with her own heartbeat. Tonight, the past had begun to speak, and she would be ready to listen. Clara settled into the cabin's worn armchair, the fabric soft and familiar under her fingers, as though it had absorbed the laughter and tears of generations past. The fire in the hearth crackled quietly, sending gentle waves of warmth across the room, the scent of burning pine mingling with the lingering aroma of damp leaves from outside. She wrapped herself in a knitted throw, the intricate patterns a testament to her aunt's patient hands, and allowed her mind to drift back over the events of the evening. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, brushing against the cabin walls in a rhythm that seemed almost like a conversation, a language she could not yet understand. The leaves tapped softly against the windows, their rustling carrying fragments of memory, stories from nights long ago when the cabin had been filled with voices, some joyful, some heavy with sorrow. Clara closed her eyes and let the sounds wash over her, each whisper stirring memories she had almost forgotten. She remembered the mornings when the cabin was alive with sunlight pouring through the windows, casting gold across the wooden floors. Her mother had loved those mornings, making tea in the kitchen while humming an old tune, her voice light but carrying a weight that Clara had never fully understood. Those mornings were a mixture of comfort and quiet tension, a balance between warmth and the unspoken, the delicate threads of family dynamics that wove together moments of love and unacknowledged fear. Now, sitting alone, Clara could feel those threads tugging at her heart. The lake earlier, the ripple in the water, the voice on the wind. It all seemed connected to the invisible threads of her family's past, threads that stretched across generations, holding secrets and regrets. She thought of her aunt's stories of distant relatives, of choices made in desperation or fear, of moments where courage had been required but taken a different form. The weight of these unspoken histories pressed gently against her chest, a reminder that the past is never truly gone. A sudden movement outside caught her attention. The shadows of the trees shifted, and for a brief second, Clara felt the presence of someone else, a lingering echo, almost like a visitor from another time. She rose, moving to the window, peering out into the twilight. The forest was quiet again, but the sensation remained. An almost imperceptible awareness that she was not entirely alone. The memory of the letters resurfaced, the confessions, the warnings, the fragments of stories that had been left behind, waiting for her to find them. Clara poured herself a cup of tea, the warmth seeping into her hands, grounding her. She sat back in the armchair, listening to the fire, to the faint patter of water dripping from the eaves, to the sighs of the old house settling into the night. Each sound seemed magnified, the quiet stretching and filling the room, creating a space that was both safe and charged with the presence of things unseen. She allowed herself to linger in that tension, to feel the weight of history pressing softly against the present, knowing that understanding would come in its own time. The letters lay spread on the table before her. She read passages aloud, her voice low, careful, as though speaking might awaken something sleeping. One line mentioned a family secret, a choice that had altered the course of several lives. Another spoke of a figure who had appeared in the woods during autumn, seen only by those willing to listen, a guardian of memories, a keeper of echoes. Clara shivered slightly, unsure whether it was the chill or the realization that her family, his stories were entwined with these whispers of the past. She remembered the ripple on the lake, the coin she had tossed, the sense that something had responded. Perhaps it was not merely superstition, she thought, but a connection, a tangible thread between the living and those who had gone before. The cabin seemed to breathe with her, each creak and groan of the floorboards a conversation with the unseen, each flicker of the firelight a reminder of the fragility and persistence of memory. Clara leaned back, closing her eyes once more, allowing the room, the forest, and the lake's whispers to envelop her. She imagined the voices of her ancestors, soft, patient, guiding her without pressure, sharing their stories through the rustle of leaves, through the warmth of the fire, through the faint shimmer of water in the moonlight. The night deepened, wrapping the cabin in a cocoon of quiet, a gentle lull that invited reflection and rest. Time seemed suspended, the present folding over the past informing the present, and Clara felt a subtle peace in the awareness that the night would carry her through these memories safely. Soon she would sleep, and in dreams, perhaps meet the voices again, hear their stories more clearly, and understand the patterns of her family, the consequences of choices made, and the resilience that had endured across generations. With a final sip of tea, Clara set the cup down, letting its warmth linger in her hands. She tucked herself beneath the throw, listening to the fire's crackle, the whispering trees, and the soft patter of leaves outside. The night was alive with echoes, yet it felt protective, comforting, and in that quiet, Clara allowed herself to surrender to sleep, letting the gentle rhythm of the night carry her into dreams, where past and present intertwined seamlessly. Clara awoke briefly, stirred by the soft sigh of wind brushing against the cabin walls. The night had deepened into a velvet darkness, dotted with stars that flickered faintly through the small window panes. She lay for a moment, listening, letting her thoughts drift along the invisible threads that connected her to the past. Somewhere in the house, the old grandfather clock ticked, its sound steady and grounding, each measured tick a gentle reminder that she was here, now, but also tied to all the yesterdays that had shaped this place. The fire had dwindled, leaving a gentle glow that casts long shadows across the room. Clara wrapped her hands around the blanket, feeling the texture of the knitted fibers, the familiar bumps and twists, like the fingerprints of time itself. Her mind wandered back to the lake, to the shimmer of moonlight on water, and to the fleeting figure she had glimpsed, a shadow moving with purpose, yet almost impossibly light, as if it did not fully belong to this world. She shivered, not from fear, but from the strange comfort of sensing something beyond the ordinary. She thought about the letters again, the faded ink curling at the edges, the careful script that carried a voice from the past. Each line seemed alive, resonating in the quiet night, telling stories of courage, regret, and choices made in the shadow of consequences. One passage in particular had stayed with her, a story of a young woman long ago who had made a decision that split her family, forcing each member to find a path that led to both loss and understanding. Clara could almost hear her voice, soft and trembling, yet resolute. The cabin seemed to respond to her thoughts. Each creak of the floorboards, each gust of wind, a subtle punctuation, as if the house itself were reminding her that memory and place are inseparable. She rose slowly, padding across the wooden floor to the window where the moonlight spilled across the forest outside. Shadows shifted among the trees, stretching and contracting, carrying the silhouettes of branches, like hands reaching out from the past. The air smelled faintly of pine and damp earth, a scent that grounded her while simultaneously carrying her deeper into reflection. She thought of her mother, of quiet evenings spent in this very cabin decades ago, when the room had been filled with whispered stories and the soft aroma of tea. Back then, her mother had spoken of family secrets in hushed tones, of decisions that had been made out of necessity or fear. Clara now understood the weight of those words, how choices ripple across generations, sometimes in ways that are subtle, sometimes in ways that change everything. Outside, a soft rustling drew her gaze to the edge of the clearing. The trees moved gently, yet she thought she glimpsed a figure standing just beyond the shadows, watching. It felt almost like a guardian, a presence connected to the stories she held in her heart. She imagined that it was the echo of her grandmother, or perhaps some unseen ancestor, standing vigil, ensuring that the past remained honored even as it became history. Clara smiled faintly, feeling a sense of continuity, a thread linking her to those who had lived, loved, and faltered before her. She returned to the armchair, tea long finished, and pulled the letters close again. Her fingers traced the edges, following the lines of ink as though they were pathways through time. She read silently, hearing the whispers beneath the words, the pauses between lines where the real story lived. Stories of courage in the face of sorrow, small acts of kindness that had quietly changed lives. Moments of quiet heroism, unrecorded by history but preserved in memory. A sudden gust rattled the window, and Clara felt the presence again, lighter this time, more like a shared breath than a shadow. She realized that the cabin, the forest, the lake, and the night itself were not simply backdrops, but participants in the story, witnesses to all that had come before and all that would follow. There was a rhythm here, an unspoken understanding that while she was only one moment in the lineage, her attention, her reflection, her care for these memories mattered. The night stretched on, filled with quiet sounds, The soft hoot of an owl, the distant trickle of a stream, the subtle movement of leaves in the wind. Clara felt a serenity in the tension, a comfort in the echoes of the past, a sense that though some stories are tinged with sorrow, they are also rich with life and connection. Slowly, she let her eyelids fall, breathing in the mixture of pine, fire, and earth, feeling the gentle pull of sleep, carrying her into a space where past and present intertwined, where stories whispered, and where she could rest. Knowing she was held by time itself in that moment, Clara surrendered to the night, letting her mind drift into dreams. Carrying with her the voices of ancestors, the shimmer of the lake, and the quiet, enduring warmth of the cabin that had been witness to generations. The fire flickered one last time before fading completely, leaving only the gentle hum of life and memory to cradle her to sleep. Asterisk. The first light of dawn crept gently through the cabin windows, brushing the wooden floor with soft gold. Clara stirred, the warmth of the bed pulling her reluctantly awake. Yet a sense of anticipation lingered. Outside, the forest hummed, with morning life, the whisper of leaves, the distant trill of a bird, and the gentle patter of dew dripping from pine needles. She lingered in the quiet, letting the sounds settle into her consciousness, carrying a calm, almost meditative rhythm that felt like a heartbeat shared between the cabin and the woods. Beyond rising slowly, Clara wrapped herself in a woolen shawl, feeling the familiar texture against her skin. She moved toward the small kettle on the stove, adding water and lighting the flame beneath. The gentle hiss and pop as the water warmed seemed amplified in the stillness, grounding her in the present, while memories from the night floated in and out of her mind like the morning mist. She poured herself a cup of steaming tea, inhaling the earthy aroma, savoring the moment of solitude. Her thoughts wandered to the letters again, the delicate script and faded ink carrying the weight of decades. Clara found herself imagining the lives of the people who had penned them, their daily struggles, fleeting joys, whispered regrets, and quiet triumphs. There was a haunting beauty in the permanence of their words, a reminder that life, even when shadowed by sorrow, leaves traces that resonate across time. She sipped her tea, feeling warmth spread through her chest, the simple act of reflection connecting her to generations she had never known but somehow deeply understood. She stepped outside into the morning, the ground still wet from a faint overnight drizzle. Tiny droplets clung to spider webs, shimmering like fragile jewels in the early sun. The air was crisp, scented with pine and damp earth, and each inhalation felt cleansing, as if the forest itself was offering a gentle exhalation of peace. Clara walked toward the edge of the clearing, the soft crunch of wet leaves underfoot blending seamlessly with the distant call of an owl that had yet to find its rest. Her gaze settled on the lake, the water, a mirror reflecting the pastel hues of dawn. Ripples disturbed its surface as a soft breeze brushed across, and Clara thought she saw something just beneath the waves, an indistinct shimmer, as though the lake held secrets it had been keeping for centuries. She lingered there, drawn by a mixture of curiosity and a strange comfort in familiarity, sensing that the water itself bore witness to untold stories, echoing the lives and choices of those who had walked the same paths she now followed. A sudden rustling in the underbrush drew her attention, and for a heartbeat, She thought she saw a shadowy figure move with deliberate purpose. Almost like a guardian of the forest, Clara felt no fear, only a deep acknowledgement, as if the presence were a gentle reminder of the interconnectedness of past and present, of human and nature, of stories carried forward by memory and reflection. She smiled faintly, knowing she was not alone, though alone in the way one feels deeply understood without words. As the sun rose higher, Clara returned to the cabin. Feeling the comforting weight of familiarity, she moved to the old writing desk, her fingers tracing the carved edges where her mother had once sat. Filling pages with reflections and guidance, Clara opened a fresh notebook, inspired by the letters and the whispers of the forest. Her pen moved slowly at first, capturing fragments of thoughts, then gaining momentum as the words became a bridge between past lessons and present realizations. She wrote about courage, about mistakes and forgiveness, about the quiet acts of bravery that often go unnoticed. She described the flickering shadows by the lake, the warmth of the fire, the lingering presence that made the night feel alive. Each word felt like a thread weaving together fragments of memory and imagination, grounding her in the sanctuary of the cabin, while also opening doors to unseen realms. By mid, Clara had filled several pages, her heart lighter, her spirit more attuned to the subtleties of the world around her. She paused to stretch, noticing how the sunlight now illuminated every surface in the cabin, highlighting the textures of wood, the patterns of woven blankets, and the soft folds of curtains dancing in the breeze. The cabin felt alive, a living vessel of memory, comfort, and the faint, persistent echo of those who had walked these grounds long before. Before leaving for a walk through the woods, Clara took a deep breath, letting the serenity of the morning fill her lungs. She understood, Moritangeber, that the forest, the lake, the cabin, and even the letters were not merely relics, they were living witnesses, offering lessons and solace, reminding her that life's complexities are often softened by reflection, by patience, and by an openness to the whispers of the past. Clara stepped outside once more, each footfall a gentle rhythm against the damp earth, each breath a quiet celebration of presence. She moved deeper into the forest, the morning light filtering through the trees, carrying with it the promise of discovery, reflection, and the subtle magic that lingers when history, memory, and nature intertwine. And as she wandered, she felt that delicate balance, the tension between sorrow and comfort, between solitude and connection, and between the past that shaped her and the present that welcomed her with open arms. Asterisk. Clara's steps led her along a narrow forest trail, the soft crunch of fallen leaves beneath her boots creating a rhythm that felt almost like music. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, painting the ground with patches of gold, amber, and rust. The air was cool but not biting, carrying with it the earthy scent of pine needles, moss, and damp soil. Somewhere above, a woodpecker drummed against an ancient oak, its steady beat echoing through the quiet of the morning. Clara breathed deeply, letting the scents and sounds fill her senses. Each inhale, a reminder of the present. Each exhale, a gentle release of worry. She paused at a small clearing where the sunlight pooled in a perfect circle, illuminating a fallen tree covered in soft moss. Clara ran her hand along the bark, feeling the ridges and grooves, each telling a story of seasons past, storms weathered, and time's patient passage. The sensation was grounding, connecting her to something larger than herself, a continuity of life and growth she had almost forgotten in the rush of her city existence. For a moment, she allowed herself to simply exist, to listen to the forest breathing, to watch the delicate dance of a spider, weaving its web in the corner of the clearing. Her thoughts drifted to the past, the quiet moments of her childhood spent wandering with her father along similar trails, the stories he had told, half real, half imagined, of spirits and guardians of the woods. He had spoken of how the forest holds memories, not just of people, but of ebbs, emotions, choices, and regrets. Clara had dismissed it as fanciful then, but now she felt an undeniable truth in his words, as if the forest itself carried the weight of all who had walked its paths. She continued along the trail until she came to a small, weathered bridge spanning a creek. The water below gurgled softly over smooth stones, creating a melody of its own. Clara leaned against the railing, watching sunlight glinting off the surface, and noticed shapes beneath the water pebbles, arranged almost deliberately, as if someone had tried to tell a story in miniature. She imagined hands, long gone, gently placing each stone, perhaps as offerings or as markers of significant moments. The idea gave her a shiver, not of fear, but of reverent awe. As she crossed the bridge, a sudden movement at the edge of the trail caught her eye. A fox, its fur a vibrant mix of orange and gold, paused and regarded her with intelligent, unflinching eyes. Clara froze, feeling the rare intimacy of a shared glance. The fox did not flee. Instead, it stepped lightly onto the path, then disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind the lingering sense that she had just been witness to something meaningful, a fleeting connection with a creature that understood more than it let on. Her mind wandered back to the letters again, the scribbled lines that had brought her here. Taught this forest to these quiet moments of reflection. She thought of the people who had lived, loved, and struggled decades ago, and how their choices echoed into the present, intertwining with her own story. Each decision, each act of kindness or regret, became part of the tapestry she now walked within. She could almost hear whispers carried by the wind, gentle voices telling tales of courage, loss, and the quiet hope that life endures. Clara paused near the edge of the creek, the water reflecting the sky above, a mix of soft blues and pale yellows. She sat on a moss-covered stone, the coolness seeping through her clothes, grounding her in the moment. She closed her eyes, listening to the symphony of nature, the babbling creek, the rustling leaves, the distant calls of birds, and the faint echo of a breeze moving through the treetops. In this stillness, she felt a profound sense of connection, not just to the forest, but to herself, to her past, and to the intricate web of human experience that spanned generations. After a long while, she rose and continued her walk, following the trail as it curved back toward the cabin. Along the way, she encountered subtle remnants of history, an old stone marker half covered in moss, faint initials carved into a tree trunk, and the occasional scrap of forgotten paper caught between roots. Each small artifact felt like a message, a thread linking her to moments she could not fully know but could deeply feel. By the time she reached the cabin, the sun was high in the sky, casting long, warm shadows across the porch. Clara took a deep breath, inhaling the sense of pine and earth, feeling renewed, grounded, and intimately aware of the fragile beauty of life and memory. She placed her hands gently on the wooden door, pausing to feel its familiar texture, and then stepped inside, carrying with her the peace and quiet wisdom she had gathered along the trail. Inside, she unpacked her small notebook and began to record her experiences, sketching the fox, the creek, and the patterns of sunlight on the forest floor. Each word and line became a testament to the delicate, often unseen moments that shape our inner lives, capturing the subtle magic and haunting echoes of the natural world. By the time she looked up, the cabin was filled with the golden glow of afternoon light, a soft, comforting warmth that seemed to affirm the deep connections she had discovered in the quiet spaces between memory and reality. Clara settled into the cabin with a quiet sigh, letting the soft creak of the wooden floor beneath her feet mingle with the lingering scents of pine and damp earth. Outside, the forest hummed with life. The whisper of wind through the tree, the distant call of a hawk, and the occasional rustle of leaves as small creatures moved unseen. Each sound was a reminder that life continued, steady and patient, even in moments of solitude. She poured herself a cup of herbal tea, its warmth radiating through her palms, and carried it to the window, where she could watch the sunlight dance across the canopy. The fox she had seen earlier appeared in her mind again, its golden fur glinting in the morning light, its eyes reflecting an intelligence that seemed almost human. Clara smiled softly, feeling a connection to the wild, to the unseen threads that linked all living things, and to the stories that history had whispered through the ages. She thought of her grandmother's letters, the faded ink and carefully chosen words, and how they had guided her steps into the forest, guiding her to discover not just the external landscape but the hidden contours of her own heart. Sitting with her tea, Clara allowed her mind to wander back to the creek, to the soft gurgle of water over smooth stones. She recalled the pebbles arranged in deliberate patterns, the sense that someone long ago had tried to communicate across time, leaving traces that invited reflection. The thought sent a shiver of awe down her spine, mingling with the cozy comfort of the cabin. Time seemed to stretch, the past and present folding together in a seamless continuum, and she felt the weight of generations on her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a gift of perspective. Her pen moved across the pages of her notebook, sketching the patterns of sunlight, the intricate details of leaves, the Moscovite stone, and even the fleeting outline of the fox as it vanished among the trees. Each stroke was deliberate, meditative, a way of weaving together memory and experience into a tangible form. She paused frequently, listening to the subtle symphony outside. The wind brushing against the windows, the faint creak of branches, the distant hum of insects hidden among the underbrush. Every sound was amplified in the quiet, each one a note in the gentle lullaby of the forest dot. As afternoon drifted into evening, Clara lit a small fire in the hearth. The flickering flames cast warm shadows across the wooden walls, bringing the cabin to life with a soft glow. She placed a blanket across her lap and settled into the armchair, letting the comfort of the fire and the gentle warmth of her tea settle her body and mind. She thought about the people whose lives had intersected with this forest, the choices made, the loves lost, the quiet moments of courage. Their echoes filled the room, not as ghosts, but as lessons, reminders of resilience and connection. Clara's thoughts turned to her own life, to the small acts of kindness and courage she could offer to the world. She realized that even seemingly insignificant choices, smiling at a stranger, leaving a note of encouragement, pausing to listen, were threads in the vast tapestry of human experience, each one capable of rippling outward in ways she could never fully know. The forest had taught her patience, attention, and reverence, and she felt an urge to carry that sense of presence into her own life, to move gently and intentionally through each day. As twilight descended, the shadows grew longer, and Clara stepped outside to watch the sun dip behind the horizon. The sky blazed with hues of rose, gold, and lavender, reflecting in the creek and pooling in the small clearings among the trees. The fox, perhaps the same one she had glimpsed earlier, appeared again at the edge of the clearing. Its gaze met hers for a heartbeat, a silent acknowledgement of shared understanding, before it disappeared into the folds of the forest, leaving only the echo of its presence behind. Returning to the cabin, Clara prepared for the evening. She placed her notebook on the small table, poured the last of her tea into a mug, and tucked herself under the thick, warm blanket. The fire crackled softly, and outside the first stars began to pierce the deepening blue of the sky. She felt a quiet gratitude, a soft glow of contentment that spread from her chest outward, filling the small cabin with a sense of peace. Before closing her eyes, Clara made a small note, a gentle reminder to her listeners: if you've been enjoying these quiet wanderings and reflective tales, please consider subscribing to the channel so that you can continue to explore these stories together and support the creation of moments like these. A soft smile touched her lips as she whispered to herself, "May the night bring rest, and may tomorrow greet us with gentle light." Finally, she let her eyes drift closed. The fire's warmth, the forest's whispers, and the lingering magic of unseen connections wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. With each breath, she sank deeper into relaxation, feeling safe, at peace, and carried on the gentle currents of memory and imagination. Outside, the wind sang its lullaby. The forest exhaled softly, and the stars blinked awake. Clara's thoughts faded into the embrace of night, and the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for tomorrow's quiet discoveries. Tot good night to Asteriski. A crisp breeze drifted through the clearing as Clara stepped outside the cabin the following morning, the first golden rays of dawn brushing the treetops with warmth. The air was rich with the scent of wet earth, pine needles, and faint hints of early frost, a delicate reminder that autumn was deepening in these quiet hills of Vermont. Clara's breath formed tiny clouds in front of her face as she inhaled slowly, letting the cool morning air awaken her senses. Each intake a gentle symphony of nature's quiet rhythms. She paused for a moment to watch a thin layer of mist curling along the forest floor, weaving between moss-covered rocks and fallen leaves. The sound of water trickled softly in the distance, perhaps from the small creek that cut through the valley. It was a soothing, hypnotic sound, almost as if the forest itself was whispering secrets from generations past. Clara had always been sensitive to such subtleties, the small shifts in light, the faintest rustle of leaves, the way shadows moved in a pattern that seemed purposeful rather than random. Today's journey was not simply a walk. It was a deliberate exploration of spaces that held memories, places where time seemed to fold in on itself. Clara recalled her grandfather's stories about the old mill on the hill, dailies of how the building had once been a place of community, laughter, and, during the harsh winters, survival. She imagined the echo of children's laughter across the frozen river, the rhythmic creak of the water wheel, and the warmth of families huddled inside, listening to fires crackle while stories were passed from one generation to the next. As she followed the narrow, winding path through the woods, Clara noticed a series of footprints in the soft soil. They were small, delicate, perhaps left by a deer, and they seemed to lead her deeper into a part of the forest she had never explored before. A sense of anticipation stirred in her chest. Every step she took seemed to carry a resonance, as if the forest was acknowledging her presence, guiding her towards something just beyond the edges of perception. She could almost hear the faint hum of history, vibrating through the roots and rocks beneath her boots. The path opened into a small clearing, and Clara stopped, taking in the view. An old stone bridge spanned the creek, its surface slick with moss, each stone telling a story of resilience and age. Sunlight streamed through the canopy, illuminating a single golden leaf clinging to a branch, suspended in the quiet air. Like a delicate beacon, she felt a shiver run down her spine, not of cold, but of recognition, as though she had stumbled upon a place that existed outside of ordinary time, where past and present converged. Clara moved slowly, deliberately, crossing the bridge and pausing in the middle to look down at the water below. Tiny ripples formed patterns that reminded her of Celtic symbols, echoes of a distant culture whose influence had long since faded from the land, but whose energy still lingered in subtle ways. She placed her hand lightly on the cold stone railing, feeling the pulse of history beneath her fingertips. For a moment, she imagined the lives of those who had once crossed this very bridge, each step a choice, each decision a thread woven into the fabric of countless stories. In the distance, a faint melody floated through the air, soft, almost imperceptible. It seemed to come from the forest itself, a lullaby carried by the wind, harmonizing with the trickling creek and the rustle of leaves. Clara closed her eyes and let herself drift with the sound, her mind opening to memories she hadn't consciously remembered. Faces of family, both living and gone, danced before her eyes. Her grandmother tending the garden, her mother reading beside the fireplace, moments of quiet connection that had shaped her understanding of home, love, and belonging. The gentle music led her further along the path, where the forest grew denser, yet still welcoming. She felt the pull of curiosity and a subtle undercurrent of unease, a mixture that reminded her of the duality of life, beauty, and fear, comfort and tension, joy and sorrow, all coexisting. Somewhere within that juxtaposition, Clara sensed the lessons she was meant to uncover, the truths that could heal old wounds, while acknowledging the shadows they cast. By the time she reached a sun-dappled clearing, The song of the forest had faded to a soft whisper, leaving only the natural symphony of wind and water. Clara took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the pure morning air, and smiled to herself. She knew the day held more revelations, more moments that would quietly etch themselves into her memory. With careful steps, she moved toward the heart of the woods, ready to follow wherever the path and the stories it held might lead. Tonight, as the stars emerge once again, may your mind find the same gentle serenity, the comforting rhythm of breath, and the quiet magic that lingers in the spaces between moments. Sleep peacefully, and let the whispers of the forest guide your dreams. Asterisk as the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the forest floor, Clara found herself approaching an abandoned farmhouse tucked between two rolling hills. The structure was worn by Timid's wooden siding, grey and peeling, windows clouded with dust, and a faint sag in the roofline suggesting decades of weather and neglect. Yet, despite its disrepair, it radiated a strange kind of warmth, a memory of life long past, as if the walls themselves remembered laughter, arguments, and whispered secrets. She paused at the edge of the clearing, her boots crunching softly on fallen leaves. The wind rustled the remaining golden foliage, sending a cascade of amber down around her, and she felt an odd sense of intimacy with the place. Clara stepped forward carefully, her hand brushing against the rough, textured siding. She could almost hear the echoes of footsteps, the faint scrape of chairs on wooden floors, the distant hum of voices from generations ago. The farmhouse seemed suspended in time, a keeper of stories that had once been ordinary, but were now extraordinary simply because they endured. Inside, the air was cool and still, carrying the scent of aged wood, old paper, and faint traces of dried flowers left behind by someone who had cared deeply for this space. Clara ran her fingers over a worn wooden table, noticing carvings etched into the surface: initials, hearts, dates that marked moments of significance long forgotten. Each mark told a story she could feel but not fully know, a poignant reminder of human desire to leave something behind, a small imprint on the world that proves existence. Through a cracked window, sunlight fell on the remnants of a once-loved kitchen, illuminating faded ceramic dishes and a kettle rusting gently in the corner. Clara imagined the morning rituals that had occurred here. Coffee brewing, bread toasted, hands busy with preparation and care. The sounds of the past seemed almost audible: the clinking of utensils, the soft murmur of conversation, the occasional laugh of a child chasing a beam of light across the floor. She let herself linger in that imagined reality, letting the warmth of human presence fill the quiet space around her. Moving cautiously through the hallway, Clara noticed a staircase leading to the upper floor. Each step creaked beneath her weight, a gentle chorus of protest from the house itself. She ascended slowly, feeling as though each movement drew her deeper into a memory, or perhaps a memory drawing her in. At the top, the landing opened onto a small bedroom, its walls lined with faded wallpaper patterned with delicate flowers. A small, cracked mirror hung crookedly, reflecting her face with subtle distortions, reminding her that perception itself is rarely perfect. yet often telling. In the corner, a child's wooden rocking chair swayed slightly, though no wind entered through the sealed windows. Clara's heart skipped a beat, a shiver of anticipation coursing through her. She reminded herself that houses hold energy, memory, and sometimes, if one listens carefully, echoes that are not entirely imagined. Yet, instead of fear, she felt a tender curiosity, a desire to understand the lives that had moved through this place. The choices made, the moments of joy and heartbreak woven into every floorboard, every pane of glass. Clara ran her fingers over a chest at the foot of the bed, lifting the lid to reveal stacks of yellowed letters tied with ribbon, journals filled with delicate handwriting, pressed flowers, and faded photographs. Each item was a time capsule, a message from someone who had hoped to be remembered. She opened one of the letters, the script curling across the page in elegant loops, detailing the small triumphs and sorrows of a family who had lived, loved, and endured. Tears gathered in her eyes, not from fright, but from profound empathy, a recognition of life's impermanence and the beauty that persists even in absence. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the trees and sending a soft, haunting melody through the broken shutters. Clara closed the chest carefully, leaving the letters intact, and took a deep breath. The farmhouse, silent now, seemed to sigh in response, a mutual acknowledgement of presence and respect. She stepped back onto the porch, letting the sun's fading warmth wash over her, feeling a deep connection to both the land and the people who had shaped it. With a final glance, she turned toward the path leading back to the cabin. Each step carried a sense of reverence, as though she was moving through not only space, but time itself, guided by invisible threads that wove history, memory, and emotion together. The wind whispered gently in her ears, carrying the soft laughter of children, the faint creak of rocking chairs, and the muted cadence of lives that had once been ordinary, yet now felt sacred tonight. As you close your eyes, imagine the same delicate whispers and gentle echoes. Let the rhythm of Clara's journey, the tender weight of memories, and the quiet presence of the past guide you to a restful, peaceful sleep. May your dreams be filled with warmth, reflection, and a subtle, comforting shiver of the unseen. Clara returned to the cabin as the shadows of evening stretched long and thin across the landscape. The soft glow from the setting sun bathed the forest in golden light, warming the air just enough to carry the scent of fallen leaves and pine resin. She paused at the edge of the clearing, noticing the subtle movement of wildlife preparing for the night squirrels darting up trees, a deer stepping cautiously along a hidden path, and birds settling into their nests with gentle rustlings. There was a rhythm here, a quiet cadence that felt both grounding and ephemeral, reminding her of the fragile balance of life that persists even when human stories fade into memory. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of wood, smoke, and dried herbs, a comforting combination that invited Clara to linger. She set down her pack and allowed herself a moment to breathe, letting the weight of the day settle gently in her chest. Each exhale seemed to release not only the tension in her body, but also the lingering threads of anxiety that had followed her from the farmhouse. She ran her hands along the wooden table, feeling the smooth grooves worn by countless meals, conversations, and moments of simple domestic life. The textures and scents carried echoes of those who had lived here before, ordinary lives infused with quiet courage, tenderness, and occasional sorrow. As darkness deepened, Clara lit a single lantern, its warm glow casting soft shadows along the walls. She imagined the cabin as it might have been decades ago. A family gathered around a flickering fire, children huddled close to their parents, the air filled with whispered stories of the past and cautious laughter that eased the weight of everyday struggles. There was an almost palpable energy in the room, as if the memories themselves had settled into the nooks and corners, waiting for someone to notice, to note him, and to breathe them back into life for a moment more. Her gaze fell upon a small writing desk tucked into the corner. On it lay a collection of journals, stacked neatly as though arranged by someone with meticulous care. Clara lifted the top journal, the leather cover worn soft and supple with age, and flipped through pages filled with flowing script. Each entry captured the mundane and extraordinary, recording births, celebrations, quarrels, reconciliations, and quiet reflections. There were stories of lost love, moments of triumph, and everyday miracles hidden within the routine of living. Clara felt as though she were reading not just words, but the essence of people who had poured themselves into these pages, hoping someone, someday, would understand the depth of their experiences. In the distance, a faint melody floated through the air, soft, almost imperceptible. It seemed to come from the forest itself, a lullaby carried by the wind, harmonizing with the trickling creek and the rustle of leaves. Clara closed her eyes and let herself drift with the sound, her mind opening to memories she hadn't consciously remembered. Faces of family, both living and gone, danced before her eyes. Her grandmother tending the garden, her mother reading beside the fireplace, moments of quiet connection that had shaped her understanding of home, love, and belonging. The gentle music led her further along the path, where the forest grew denser, yet still welcoming. She felt the pull of curiosity and a subtle undercurrent of unease, a mixture that reminded her of the duality of life, beauty, and fear, comfort and tension, joy and sorrow, all coexisting. Somewhere within that juxtaposition, Clara sensed the lessons she was meant to uncover, the truths that could heal old wounds while acknowledging the shadows they cast. By the time she reached a sun-dappled clearing, the song of the forest had faded to a soft whisper, leaving only the natural symphony of wind and water. Clara took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the pure morning air, and smiled to herself. She knew the day held more revelations, more moments that would quietly etch themselves into her memory. With careful steps, she moved toward the heart of the woods, ready to follow wherever the path and the stories it held might lead. Tonight, as the stars emerge once again, may your mind find the same gentle serenity, the comforting rhythm of breath, and the quiet magic that lingers in the spaces between moments. Sleep peacefully, and let the whispers of the forest guide your dreams. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the forest floor, Clara found herself approaching an abandoned farmhouse tucked between two rolling hills. The structure was worn by Timit's wooden siding, grey and peeling, windows clouded with dust, and a faint sag in the roofline suggesting decades of weather and neglect. Yet, despite its disrepair, it radiated a strange kind of warmth, a memory of life long past, as if the walls themselves remembered laughter, arguments, and whispered secrets. She paused at the edge of the clearing, her boots crunching softly on fallen leaves. The wind rustled the remaining golden foliage, sending a cascade of amber down around her, and she felt an odd sense of intimacy with the place. Clara stepped forward carefully, her hand brushing against the rough, textured siding. She could almost hear the echoes of footsteps, the faint scrape of chairs on wooden floors, the distant hum of voices from generations ago. The farmhouse seemed suspended in time, a keeper of stories that had once been ordinary, but were now extraordinary simply because they endured. Inside, the air was cool and still, carrying the scent of aged wood, old paper, and faint traces of dried flowers left behind by someone who had cared deeply for this space. Clara ran her fingers over a worn wooden table, noticing carvings etched into the surface initials, hearts, dates that marked moments of significance long forgotten. Each mark told a story she could feel but not fully know, a poignant reminder of human desire to leave something behind, a small imprint on the world that proves existence. Through a cracked window, sunlight fell on the remnants of a once-loved kitchen, illuminating faded ceramic dishes and a kettle rusting gently in the corner. Clara imagined the morning rituals that had occurred here. Coffee brewing, bread toasted, hands busy with preparation and care. The sounds of the past seemed almost audible, the clinking of utensils, the soft murmur of conversation, the occasional laugh of a child chasing a beam of light across the floor. She let herself linger in that imagined reality, letting the warmth of human presence fill the quiet space around her. Moving cautiously through the hallway, Clara noticed a staircase leading to the upper floor. Each step creaked beneath her weight, a gentle chorus of protest from the house itself. She ascended slowly, feeling as though each movement drew her deeper into a memory, or perhaps a memory drawing her in. At the top, the landing opened onto a small bedroom, its walls lined with faded wallpaper patterned with delicate flowers. A small, cracked mirror hung crookedly, reflecting her face with subtle distortions, reminding her that perception itself is rarely perfect, yet often telling. In the corner, a child's wooden rocking chair swayed slightly, though no wind entered through the sealed windows. Clara's heart skipped a beat, a shiver of anticipation coursing through her. She reminded herself that houses hold energy, memory, and sometimes, if one listens carefully, echoes that are not entirely imagined. Yet, instead of fear, she felt a tender curiosity, a desire to understand the lives that had moved through this place. The choices made, the moments of joy and heartbreak woven into every floorboard, every pane of glass. Clara ran her fingers over a chest at the foot of the bed, lifting the lid to reveal stacks of yellowed letters tied with ribbon, journals filled with delicate handwriting, pressed flowers, and faded photographs. Each item was a time capsule, a message from someone who had hoped to be remembered. She opened one of the letters, the script curling across the page in elegant loops, detailing the small triumphs and sorrows of a family who had lived, loved, and endured. Tears gathered in her eyes, not from fright, but from profound empathy, a recognition of life's impermanence and the beauty that persists even in absence. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the trees and sending a soft, haunting melody through the broken shutters. Clara closed the chest carefully, leaving the letters intact, and took a deep breath. The farmhouse, silent now, seemed to sigh in response, a mutual acknowledgement of presence and respect. She stepped back onto the porch, letting the sun's fading warmth wash over her, feeling a deep connection to both the land and the people who had shaped it. With a final glance, she turned toward the path leading back to the cabin. Each step carried a sense of reverence, as though she was moving through not only space, but time itself, guided by invisible threads that wove history, memory, and emotion together. The wind whispered gently in her ears, carrying the soft laughter of children, the faint creak of rocking chairs, and the muted cadence of lives that had once been ordinary, yet now felt sacred tonight. As you close your eyes, imagine the same delicate whispers and gentle echoes. Let the rhythm of Clara's journey, the tender weight of memories, and the quiet presence of the past guide you to a restful, peaceful sleep. May your dreams be filled with warmth, reflection, and a subtle, comforting shiver of the unseen. Asterisk. Clara returned to the cabin as the shadows of evening stretched long and thin across the landscape. The soft glow from the setting sun bathed the forest in golden light, warming the air just enough to carry the scent of fallen leaves and pine resin. She paused at the edge of the clearing, noticing the subtle movement of wildlife preparing for the night squirrels darting up trees, a deer stepping cautiously along a hidden path, and birds settling into their nests with gentle rustlings. There was a rhythm here, a quiet cadence that felt both grounding and ephemeral, reminding her of the fragile balance of life that persists even when human stories fade into memory. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of wood, smoke, and dried herbs, a comforting combination that invited Clara to linger. She set down her pack and allowed herself a moment to breathe, letting the weight of the day settle gently in her chest. Each exhale seemed to release not only the tension in her body, but also the lingering threads of anxiety that had followed her from the farmhouse. She ran her hands along the wooden table, feeling the smooth grooves worn by countless meals, conversations, and moments of simple domestic life. The textures and scents carried echoes of those who had lived here before, ordinary lives infused with quiet courage, tenderness, and occasional sorrow. As darkness deepened, Clara lit a single lantern, its warm glow casting soft shadows along the walls. She imagined the cabin as it might have been decades ago. A family gathered around a flickering fire, children huddled close to their parents, the air filled with whispered stories of the past and cautious laughter that eased the weight of everyday struggles. There was an almost palpable energy in the room, as if the memories themselves had settled into the nooks and corners, waiting for someone to notice, to note him, and to breathe them back into life for a moment more. Her gaze fell upon a small writing desk tucked into the corner. On it lay a collection of journals, stacked neatly as though arranged by someone with meticulous care. Clara lifted the top journal, the leather cover worn soft and supple with age. and flipped through pages filled with flowing script. Each entry captured the mundane and extraordinary, recording births, celebrations, quarrels, reconciliations, and quiet reflections. There were stories of lost love, moments of triumph, and everyday miracles hidden within the routine of living. Clara felt as though she were reading not just words, but the essence of people who had poured themselves into these pages, hoping someone, someday, would understand the depth of their experiences. Clara returned. The wind outside rose, and the trees whispered secrets that seemed older than the land itself. Clara shivered, a mix of unease and wonder coursing through her. She closed the journal gently, feeling the lingering impression of lives intertwined with her own, however indirectly. The sense of connection was profound, a reminder that the human heart, with all its imperfections, always seeks continuity, remembrance, and understanding, even in absence, even in death. Love and memory persist. She moved to the window and looked out across the darkened clearing, the shadows of the forest merging with the twilight sky. Her mind wandered to the family who had once lived in the farmhouse, and the stories that had remained untold, tucked away in the walls and objects of that old home. She imagined their quiet evenings, the small rituals that gave shape to their days, and the laughter or tears that accompanied each passing season, the interplay of light and shadow, of sound and silence, made the world outside feel like both a haven and a mystery, a space where imagination and memory could dance freely. Clara retrieved a cup of tea, its warmth a small comfort against the cool evening air. She sipped slowly, savoring the ritual and the quiet solitude that allowed reflection to flow naturally. Each swallow grounded her. Each breath attuned her more closely to the rhythm of the cabin, the whispering forest, and the subtle heartbeat of the world around her. It was a moment of pause, of gentle presence, in which she felt fully alive and deeply aware of the fragile, fleeting beauty of life. As the night deepened, Clara settled by the fireplace, the dancing flames casting long, flickering shadows that seemed almost alive. She let her thoughts drift, thinking of connections, choices, and consequences, of the invisible threads linking past, present, and future. The stories she had encountered to date, the farmhouse, the journals, the echoes of laughter and sorrow wove together into a tapestry of reflection, reminding her that every life, no matter how ordinary, carries weight, significance, and resonance. And so, with the fire crackling softly and the wind murmuring outside, Clara allowed herself to sink into a gentle, contemplative stillness. In this space between shadow and light, past and present, she felt a quiet peace that was both comforting and poignant. May your own night carry this same sense of calm reflection, of warmth and memory, and may sleep find you gently, bringing dreams that whisper softly of connection, hope, and the enduring beauty of life. Clara rose from her seat by the fire, stretching slowly as the warmth seeped into her bones. Outside, the night had deepened into a velvet black, pierced by the occasional shimmer of distant stars. The forest beyond the cabin seemed alive with quiet motion, the gentle rustle of leaves, the faint scurry of creatures moving unseen through underbrush, and the whispered sigh of the wind weaving through the trees. Each sound carried a subtle resonance, a reminder that the world outside was as vivid and complex as the thoughts weaving through her mind. She moved toward the small bookshelf that lined one wall of the cabin, running her fingers along the spines of books, well-worn and well-loved. Each title suggested a story, a memory, a fragment of a life once lived, waiting to be rediscovered. Clara's eyes rested on a particularly fragile volume, its leather cover faded to a soft, muted brown. She pulled it free and carefully opened the pages, the faint scent of age and ink curling into the room like a warm breeze. The entries told the quiet stories of the house's previous occupants' acts of kindness, moments of sorrow, small triumphs, and the occasional hint of mischief that lent humanity to their days. Reading, she imagined the lives behind each word. A mother carefully tending a garden at dawn, a child whispering secrets to a friend under the eaves of the porch, an elderly man sitting quietly in a chair, reflecting on decades of joy and regret. Clara felt herself drawn into the rhythm of these lives, sensing the ebb and flow of emotion that had carried them through the seasons. There was a gentle melancholy to these reflections, an acknowledgement that life is fleeting, fragile, yet endlessly rich in moments of beauty and connection. The fire's glow shifted as she moved, shadows stretching across the walls, giving the room an almost otherworldly quality. Clara felt the brush of something intangible, a presence not sinister but quietly watchful. Perhaps it was the weight of the past, embodied in the objects and memories that filled the cabin. Or perhaps it was her own imagination, heightened by the stillness and the soft whisper of wind outside. Whatever it was, she welcomed it, sensing that the night held lessons and comfort alike. If only she would pause to notice. She stepped to the window and pressed her palms against the cool glass, gazing out at the moonlit forest. The branches swayed gently, casting skeletal shadows across the ground, and somewhere far off, the hoot of an owl punctuated the deep silence. Clara imagined the generations of people who had walked these same paths, who had witnessed the same skies, and who had made choices that rippled through time. There was a strange solace in knowing that life continues, that even moments of loss or uncertainty are woven into the tapestry of existence, remembered in ways subtle yet profound. Returning to the fireplace, Clara poured herself another cup of tea, the warmth grounding her in the present. She settled into a chair, allowing her mind to wander to the house's history and the stories she had uncovered. One entry recounted a brief, mysterious event, a light flickering in the attic, a shadow moving past a doorway, a soft whisper that vanished before it could be understood. Clara felt a thrill of curiosity mingled with a comforting sense of awe, realizing that some mysteries, whether mundane or supernatural, are meant to be experienced rather than solved. The cabin seemed to breathe with her, the flickering flames and whispering wind forming a quiet symphony. Clara allowed herself to linger in this space, where past and present intertwined seamlessly. She thought of choices, those made consciously, those imposed by circumstance, and those left unmended, the ways they shaped lives in ways both obvious and hidden. There was a gentle, almost spiritual reassurance in acknowledging that all of it, the joys, regrets, and unseen threads, was part of a larger story beyond any single moment. As the night wore on, Clara felt a deep sense of connection to the land, to those who had lived before her, and to the subtle rhythms of her own life. She reflected on her own choices, the relationships she cherished, the moments she wanted to hold on to, and the quiet acceptance of those that had passed. The cabin, with its warm glow and whispered histories, became a sanctuary where reflection and imagination could mingle freely, each insight offering a small measure of peace. Finally, she allowed herself to sink fully into the chair, holding the warmth of tea in her hands and the glow of the fire across her face. The forest outside whispered softly. The shadows stretched and shifted, and Clara closed her eyes for a brief, meditative pause. In that stillness, she felt the gentle reassurance of continuity, of memory, and of the enduring beauty of life's small, interconnected moments. And with Tar, she whispered softly to herself, sleep well, dear listener. Let your dreams carry you gently, like the wind through the trees, toward calm, comfort, and quiet wonder. The next morning, Clara awoke to the gentle patter of rain against the cabin roof, a soothing rhythm that seemed to invite contemplation. She stretched slowly, savoring the warmth of the blankets around her, and listened as the drops formed tiny rivulets along the edges of the window pane. Outside, the forest was veiled in mist. The outlines of trees softened and blurred, as if the world itself had exhaled and settled into a quiet hush. Each sound, the dripping rain, the occasional rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird felt amplified in the stillness, offering a gentle invitation to awaken fully to the day's subtle beauty. Clara rose and made her way to the small kitchenette, where she prepared a steaming cup of coffee. The aroma filled the cabin, mingling with the earthy scent of rain-soaked wood and moss that drifted through the slightly open window. She sipped slowly, letting warmth spread through her chest, a comforting reminder of home, of stability amid the uncertainty that sometimes shadowed life. Each taste seemed to anchor her, connecting her to the present moment, even as her mind wandered across the landscape of memory and reflection. The morning was quiet, almost reverent. Clara felt the urge to step outside to explore the fog-shrouded forest that had beckoned her since arriving. She donned her coat and boots, and with each step across the soft, damp earth, she felt the resilience of the forest, its quiet strength and enduring presence. The mist wrapped around her like a protective cloak, blurring the lines between reality and imagination. Every branch, every droplet of water glinting on a leaf, seemed imbued with an almost sentient awareness. Observing her as she moved, she wondered about the countless stories these woods held tales of those who had walked here before, secrets whispered to the wind, and echoes of choices long past. Her path led her to a small clearing where the mist was thinner and the shapes of the surrounding trees emerged more clearly. In the center stood an old, weathered bench, its surface smooth from years of use. Clara paused, running her hand along the worn wood, feeling the silent testimony of countless visitors who had sought solace, reflection, or simply a moment of pause. She imagined them sitting here, letting the forest's quiet embrace wash over them, leaving their burdens and fears behind, if only temporarily. It was a timeless ritual, one that connected human lives across generations. As she sat, Clara noticed subtle movements in the periphery of her vision a shadow that seemed to flit between trees, a bird's quiet descent to a low branch, the barely perceptible sway of grass as if nudged by invisible hands. She allowed herself to consider the possibility that the forest remembered, that it held traces of emotion and intent, fragments of joy, sorrow, and longing from all who had passed this way. There was no fear in this awareness, only a delicate, tingling curiosity, a recognition that life itself is composed of interwoven moments, some tangible, some ephemeral. In this reflective state, Clara thought of her own life, the choices that had brought her to this secluded cabin, the relationships she cherished, the small regrets she carried, and the quiet triumphs she seldom acknowledged. She felt a strange kinship with the past occupants of the cabin and the forest, sensing their resilience, their capacity for hope, and their understanding that even fleeting experiences could leave indelible marks on the world. She realized that memory itself was a kind of sanctuary, one that could be revisited, honored, and even healed with quiet attention and care. The rain began to taper, softening into a fine mist that clung to her eyelashes and cheeks. Clara rose and continued her walk, following a narrow path that led toward a small stream winding through the forest. The water gurgled gently over stones, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. She knelt, letting her fingers brush the cool surface. Feeling the subtle vibration of life moving through the current, she whispered a silent acknowledgement to the water, to the trees, to the mist, recognizing the interconnectedness of all things, the present, the past, and the threads that tie them together. Returning to the cabin, Clara felt lighter, as if the forest had absorbed some of her lingering tension. She prepared another cup of coffee and settled near the fire, letting the warmth seep into her bones. The cabin seemed to breathe with her, a silent witness to her quiet reflection. She thought about the choices she would face in the coming days, and the possibility that each decision, no matter how small, could ripple outward in ways she might never fully understand. Yet there was comfort in this, a gentle reassurance that life's uncertainty carried within it the potential for growth, healing, and quiet joy. As the afternoon sun pierced through the thinning mist, Clara allowed herself a moment of stillness, listening to the subtle symphony of wind, water, and forest. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the gentle pulse of life all around her. And with a soft smile, she whispered to herself and to the quiet night, waiting to return, "Sleep well, dear listener. Let your mind drift through calm streams and misty forests, and may your dreams be tender, reflective, and gently healing." The evening settled softly over the cabin, the sky painted in muted shades of lavender and deepening indigo. Clara watched as the final traces of sunlight slipped behind the distant ridges of the hills, leaving the forest in a gentle shadow that softened every line and contour. There was a hush in the air, the kind that seems to exist only in moments of complete stillness, when even the most ordinary sounds take on a sacred quality. The faint rustle of leaves, the soft whistle of wind through the pines, the occasional hoot of an owl became part of a delicate symphony that invited reflection and calm. Clara moved about the cabin, tidying the small space with slow, deliberate histories. Each movement was a ritual, a way to honor the day she had spent wandering the misted woods, reconnecting with memory and feeling. She placed a candle on the table, its flame flickering warmly, casting gentle shadows that danced along the wooden walls. The fire in the hearth crackled quietly, sending occasional sparks upward, each one a tiny, fleeting marvel. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, grateful for solitude, for the forest that had shared its secrets, and for the quiet companionship of memory and imagination. Settling into a worn armchair by the fire, Clara wrapped a knitted shawl around her shoulders and took a slow sip of herbal tea, savoring the gentle warmth as it spread through her body. She thought of the small, intimate moments that had made the day so rich. The way the mist had curled around the tree, the subtle patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor, the way her footsteps had echoed softly on the damp earth. Each memory carried with it a sense of timelessness, a quiet reassurance that even fleeting experiences could leave lasting impressions on the heart. As darkness deepened, Clara's mind drifted to stories of the past lives that had intersected with this forest long before her own. She imagined those who had walked these paths centuries ago, leaving traces of laughter, sorrow, hope, and fear embedded in the soil and trees. Perhaps, she thought, the forest remembered them in the way shadows linger, in the way wind carries faint echoes, in the way certain moments feel suspended between past and present. She felt a kinship with these invisible presences, a sense of continuity and shared experience that stretched across time. In the corner of the room, a small journal lay open, its pages waiting to receive thoughts, reflections, and sketches. Clara picked up a pen and began to write, her handwriting slow and deliberate. Words spilled onto the paper as if the day itself demanded expression. The soft glow of the fire, the delicate patterns of mist along the stream, the whisper of leaves in the evening air. She wrote about the quiet lessons the forest had imparted, the importance of noticing, of breathing, of allowing oneself to be fully present even amidst uncertainty. Each line was a tether to the world she had wandered and a bridge to the deeper understanding she carried within. Outside, the night thickened, and the sounds of the forest shifted, taking on a more mysterious tone. Shadows seemed longer, shapes more ambiguous, as if the woods themselves were watching, waiting, participating in the ritual of quiet reflection. Clara did not feel fear. Instead, she felt awe, the subtle sense of presence, the gentle thrill of unseen eyes upon her, reminded her that life was not only experienced in the conscious mind, but also in the spaces between thoughts, in the silent, almost imperceptible connections that tie past, present, and future. As she prepared for bed, Clara took one last look around the cabin, appreciating the quiet intimacy of the space. She pulled the soft blankets over her shoulders and lay down, listening to the faint symphony of night, the soft dripping of a branch still wet from earlier rain, the whisper of wind against the cabin walls, the distant, gentle call of an owl. She felt a profound sense of closure for the day, a readiness to let go of conscious thought and drift into the healing rhythms of sleep. With eyes closing and mind slowing, she whispered softly, as though sharing a secret with the universe. Sleep well, gentle soul. Let the forest cradle your dreams. Let the fire warm your heart. And may the night carry you into quiet, peaceful rest. The cabin seemed to exhale with her, the shadows softening, the fire crackling into embers, and Clara allowed herself to sink fully into the comfort of her blankets. The stillness of the night wrapping around her like a tender embrace, and wheat that the forest held her in its quiet mystery, and the night whispered its timeless lullaby, guiding her into the gentle, restorative sleep she had so earnestly sought.